The first snow of the season dusted the peaks of Eagle Valley, Montana, a land where secrets linger and memories refuse to fade. Fiona Morgan, a renowned wildlife photographer, thought she'd left this place behind for good. But after 12 long years, a sudden tragedy draws her back to confront the shadows of her past and the mysterious black Mustang known as Midnight, whose piercing blue eyes seem to hold an ancient truth. As powerful forces threaten to tear Eagle Valley apart, Fiona must rediscover her courage, heal old wounds, and uncover a hidden legacy that will change her life forever. The first snow of the season dusted the peaks of Eagle Valley, Montana, pristine white against a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at it. Fiona Morgan gripped the steering wheel of her rental car tighter as the familiar mountains came into view, their jagged silhouettes etched into her memory like a scar that never quite healed. 12 years. 12 years since she'd driven down this road, fleeing in the opposite direction with tears blurring her vision and a promise never to return. Yet here she was. The sign for Silverwood appeared around the bend. Population 2487. The number hadn't changed. Somehow that made it worse, as if time had stood still here while her life had moved relentlessly forward. Fiona adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of herself. At 37, her face had gained the weathered look of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. Fine lines framed eyes that had seen endangered species across 6 continents. Her work as a wildlife photographer had taken her to the edge of civilization and beyond, each assignment pushing her further from this place, further from the memories. The town emerged from behind the curtain of pine trees. Main Street looked frozen in time. The general store, the diner, the small library. Only the banner stretched across the street was new. Silverwood Future, home of Oak Ridge, luxury resort and spa. Fiona slowed the car, her photographer's eye automatically noting the contrast: the rusted pickup trucks parked beside shiny SUVs with out-of-state plates, the old-timers on benches eyeing suited men with suspicion, the for sale signs dotting storefronts that had been family-owned for generations. She didn't stop. Couldn't face the whispers yet. There's Fiona Morgan, Thomas's daughter, left right after her mother died. Never even called when the old man got sick. The road wound upward away from town. With each curve, the landscape grew more familiar, the knot in her stomach tightening. When the weathered mailbox appeared, Morgan carved into wood by her grandfather's hand, Fiona pulled over suddenly, unable to breathe. The manila envelope on the passenger seat contained everything she needed: death certificate, property, deed, a letter from her father's lawyer. Thomas Morgan, dead at 72. Heart attack. Found by a neighbor 2 days later. 2 days, alone. Fiona pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, fighting the guilt that rose like bile in her throat. "You shouldn't have died alone," she whispered to the empty car. The words felt hollow, useless, just like the handful of birthday cards she'd sent over the years, the occasional call that never lasted more than 5 awkward minutes. A raven landed on the mailbox, its black eyes regarding her with unnerving intelligence. It cawed once, a harsh sound that broke the silence before spreading its wings and disappearing into the trees. Time to face the music. Whispering Pines Ranch sprawled across 30 acres of mixed forest and grazing land, nestled against the mountain, like it had grown from the rock itself. The 2-story farmhouse stood weather-beaten but proud, its white paint faded to the color of old bones. Behind it, the barn leaned slightly to one side, a victim of Montana winters and neglect. Fiona parked beside her father's ancient blue pickup truck. The sight of it, so familiar, so unchanging, made her throat constrict. She grabbed her camera bag instinctively, a professional habit that had become personal armor. The key was where it had always been, hidden inside the hollow fence post third from the gate. Some things never changed in Silverwood. The house smelled of dust and silence. Fiona stood in the entryway, overwhelmed by competing sensations: the faint scent of her father's pipe tobacco, the creak of floorboards under her boots, the weight of memories pressing down like a physical force. Family photos lined the hallway wall. Fiona approached them carefully, as if they might bite. Her wedding photo, 12 years old now, the marriage itself 4 years dead. Her college graduation. And there in the center, the last photo of the 3 of them together: Fiona, her father, and her mother, Elizabeth. Taken 3 months before the cancer diagnosis that changed everything. Fiona turned away. The kitchen was eerily tidy, dishes washed and put away. The calendar on the wall was still turned to last month, with a single appointment marked Doc Harper, 3 p.m. The living room told a different story. Papers were scattered across the coffee table, books pulled from shelves, a half-empty mug of coffee growing mold. Signs of a life interrupted mid-thought. Fiona set her bag down, suddenly exhausted. She'd flown in from Alaska that morning, abandoning a project tracking wolf migrations to deal with her father's estate. The plan was simple: spend a week sorting through his belongings, meet with the real estate agent already eager to list the property, and return to her life. No fuss, no lingering. In and out like lancing a wound. She moved toward the stairs, planning to check if her old room still existed, when a photo on the mantel caught her eye. Unlike the others, this one was new, or at least new to her. It showed Emma, her daughter, in a graduation cap and gown. Emma, at 22, proud and beautiful, a journalism degree in hand. Fiona's breath caught. She hadn't seen Emma in 5 years, not since the disastrous Christmas when all their unresolved hurts had erupted into an argument that ended with Emma storming out, declaring she was done trying to have a relationship with a mother who had always chosen her career over family. Fiona touched the frame gently. Her father must have maintained contact with Emma. Of course he had. Thomas Morgan had never been one to give up on family, no matter how far they strayed. Unlike his daughter. Sleep came fitfully that night in her childhood bedroom, still decorated with faded posters of wild horses and National Geographic covers. Fiona dreamed of her mother's funeral, the rain, the small crowd of townspeople, her father's stoic face crumbling, only when he thought no one was looking, and Emma, just 10 years old, then clinging to Fiona's hand with desperate strength. Fiona had stayed for 2 weeks after the funeral. 2 weeks of suffocating grief and her father's silence, his unspoken accusation hanging between them. You weren't here when she needed you. Then came the assignment in the Serengeti, the opportunity she couldn't refuse, the relief of escape. She woke at dawn, the pale Montana light filtering through curtains her mother had sewn decades ago. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, Fiona almost called out for Emma, expecting to hear her daughter's footsteps in the hallway. The silence that answered was deafening. Coffee. She needed coffee before facing the day. Fiona padded downstairs in worn pajamas, grateful that muscle memory could navigate the creaky steps even after all these years. She was measuring grounds into the ancient percolator when she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Fiona stilled all her wilderness instincts, suddenly alert. Slowly, she turned toward the kitchen window, and there it was. A horse stood in the misty morning light just beyond the fence line. Not one of the neighbors' domesticated animals, but a wild Mustang coat, black as midnight, save for a perfect star-shaped patch of white on its forehead. Steam rose from its nostrils in the cold air as it stared directly at Fiona, with eyes that seemed impossibly blue, almost luminous against its dark face. Fiona found herself moving toward the window, drawn by the animal's eerie stillness. Wild horses were common in Eagle Valley, but they rarely ventured this close to human dwellings and never alone. The Mustang's ears flicked forward at her movement, but it didn't bolt. Instead, it maintained that unnerving eye contact as if it were looking through her, reading her thoughts. "Who are you?" Fiona whispered. The horse pawed once at the frozen ground, then took several deliberate steps along the fence line before stopping to look back at her, as if inviting her to follow. Fiona's hand reached automatically for her camera, only to remember it was still upstairs. By the time she returned, the Mustang would likely be gone. Instead, she grabbed her father's old field binoculars from the hook by the back door and stepped onto the porch, shivering in the morning chill. The horse remained watching her with that strange intensity. Through the binoculars, Fiona studied its features, the proud arch of its neck, the powerful shoulders, the intelligent eyes that seemed to hold knowledge beyond animal instinct. No signs of injury or illness that would explain its unusual behavior. It stomped again, more insistently this time, then turned and walked a few paces before looking back expectantly. "I'm not following you into the wilderness in my pajamas," Fiona told it, feeling foolish for speaking to a wild animal. The Mustang snorted, almost as if in response, then turned and trotted away toward the tree line, its dark form gradually disappearing into the morning mist. Fiona remained on the porch long after it vanished, coffee forgotten, an inexplicable sense of loss washing over her. Something about the animal had touched a chord deep within a recognition she couldn't explain. The ringing of her phone broke the spell. Her agent wondering when she'd be back in Alaska to finish the wolf project. Fiona kept her answers brief, professional. Yes, just a week to sort out her father's affairs. No, she wouldn't be extending her stay. Yes, she'd have the final selects ready for National Geographic by the deadline. After hanging up, she showered and dressed in practical layers, jeans, flannel shirt, weathered leather jacket. Her father's study awaited the heart of the paperwork she needed to sort through before meeting the real estate agent tomorrow. The study door stuck slightly as it always had. Inside, time seemed to have stood still. The heavy oak desk, the wall of bookshelves, the topographical maps of Eagle Valley pinned to corkboard, the lingering scent of pipe tobacco and old books. What wasn't familiar was the chaos. Papers littered the floor. Drawers hung open, their contents disturbed. Books had been pulled from shelves, then hastily replaced at odd angles. The ancient desktop computer sat with its tower case partially unscrewed, the hard drive missing. Fiona froze in the doorway, processing the scene. This wasn't the natural disorder of daily use. Someone had searched this room methodically and thoroughly. Her first instinct was to call the police, but she hesitated. The house had shown no signs of forced entry. Nothing else appeared to be disturbed. This was targeted someone looking for specific information. She knelt to gather scattered papers, trying to make sense of them. Most were mundane bills, correspondence, subscription renewals. But among them, she found several printouts of news articles about Oak Ridge Ventures and their resort development plans. Many passages were highlighted with her father's neat handwriting in the margins, check property lines. Historical precedent. Water rights. Fiona frowned, gathering the papers into a pile. Her father had been a history teacher before retirement, with a passion for local heritage. Had he opposed the resort development, it would be like him to care about preserving Eagle Valley's character. But would it be enough for someone to ransack his office? The answer to that question walked through her front door an hour later, after a knock that Fiona almost missed while sorting through files. "Hello," a male voice called. "Thomas, you in there?" Fiona emerged from the study to find a tall man in his early 40s standing in her entryway, removing a worn Stetson to reveal sandy hair streaked with premature gray. He wore a waxed canvas jacket with a veterinary logo embroidered on the breast pocket. "You're not Thomas," he said, unnecessarily, surprise evident in his hazel eyes. "No, I'm his daughter Fiona." She crossed her arms defensively. "And you are—" Recognition dawned on his face. "Jack Harper. I'm the local vet." He held out a calloused hand. "Your father talked about you." Fiona shook his hand briefly, trying not to wonder exactly what her father had said. "He mentioned you in his Christmas letter. You treated his barn cat?" Jack smiled, revealing laugh lines around his eyes. "Old rascal. Toughest tomcat in the county. Your dad doted on that cat like it was royalty." The smile faded. "I'm sorry about Thomas. He was a good man." "Thank you." Fiona shifted uncomfortably. "Did you need something?" Jack hesitated. "Actually, I came to check if anyone had been by the house. Your father asked me to keep an eye on some papers if anything happened to him." Alarm bells rang in Fiona's mind. Papers? What kind of papers? Research about the Oak Ridge development. Jack's eyes drifted toward the study door, which stood ajar. "May I?" Fiona led him to the study, watching his reaction to the disarray. Jack's expression darkened immediately. "Someone's been here," he said quietly. "I found it like this morning." Fiona gestured at the chaos. "The computer's hard drive is missing." Jack swore under his breath. "I was afraid of this. Your father called me the day before he died. Said he'd found something important, something about the land rights for the resort property. He was going to show me, but—" He trailed off. "But he died," Fiona finished flatly. "Of a heart attack." Something in Jack's expression made her stomach tighten. "That's what the death certificate says." "You don't believe it?" Jack ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Thomas scheduled an urgent appointment with me the morning they found him. Not for Rascal, for himself. Said he'd been feeling strange, having symptoms that worried him." "What kind of symptoms?" "He didn't specify, just said he thought someone might be watching the house." Jack met her eyes directly. 2 days later, he was dead. Before our appointment. Fiona felt cold despite the warmth of the room. "Are you suggesting my father was—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Jack interrupted quickly. "Just telling you what I know. Heart attacks happen especially to men his age." He paused. But Thomas was concerned enough about something to create a backup of his research. He told me he'd hidden it somewhere safe. Fiona gestured at the ransacked study. Well, whoever was looking for it didn't find it here. We should still try. Whatever Thomas discovered, it was important enough that he felt threatened. Jack moved toward the desk. Mind if I help you search? They spent the next hour methodically going through the study. Jack seemed to know her father's habits, suggesting places to look that Fiona wouldn't have considered behind specific books under the loose floorboard by the window inside the hollowed-out Webster's Dictionary. Dad was more paranoid than I realized, Fiona commented as they worked. Jack shrugged. Thomas was thorough, not paranoid. He believed in preserving history, especially when others wanted to bury it. Fiona paused, studying him. You knew him well. He was my friend. The simple statement carried weight. One of the few who welcomed me when I moved here 5 years ago. Silverwood can be tough on outsiders. Something in his tone resonated with Fiona, the knowledge of never quite belonging, despite best efforts. Their search yielded little of obvious importance. No hidden backup drive, no secret documents, just fragments, more annotated news clippings about Oak Ridge Ventures, a topographical map with strange markings in red pen, a half-finished letter to the county commissioner expressing concerns about water testing, and a name appearing repeatedly in her father's notes, Catherine Blackwood. Who's Catherine Blackwood? Fiona asked, holding up a page where the name was underlined twice. Jack's expression shifted. Local legend of sorts. Elderly woman who lives in a cabin up in the North Valley. Artist. Been here forever. What's her connection to my father? They were close, both interested in local history. Jack hesitated. Some folks in town call her a witch. She keeps to herself, paints strange pictures. Your father was one of her few visitors. Wahun. Fiona made a mental note to find this Catherine Blackwood. If she had been close to her father, she might know something about his research. By late afternoon, their search had yielded nothing conclusive. Jack reluctantly prepared to leave, having patience to check on at his clinic. I'd be careful who you talk to about this, he advised as they stood on the porch. Maxwell Bennett, the CEO of Oak Ridge, has a lot of influence in town. The resort promises jobs, tourism dollars. Most folks are either on his payroll or hoping to be. Including Sheriff Cooper, Fiona asked, remembering the local lawman from her childhood. Especially Cooper. He and Bennett are golf buddies. Jack put on his hat. If you find anything, call me first. My number's in your dad's address book. After Jack left, Fiona returned to the kitchen, suddenly aware she hadn't eaten all day. As she made a sandwich from the supplies she'd picked up in town, her mind churned with questions. Was her father's death truly from natural causes? What had he discovered that warranted a break-in? And why did it matter to her? It doesn't, she told herself firmly. I'm here to sell the ranch and leave. Whatever conspiracy theories Jack Harper has, they're not my problem. Yet she couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her, or the nagging sense that she was missing something important. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. The real estate agent, eager to list the property, kept emphasizing how much developers were paying for land in Eagle Valley. The funeral home needed decisions about her father's ashes. Her agent called again about the Alaska project. By evening, Fiona's head throbbed with tension. She poured herself a generous glass of whiskey from her father's ancient bottle of Maker's Mark and stepped out onto the back porch, seeking the solace of open space. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, the silhouettes of eagles circled lazily on thermal currents. The beauty of it struck Fiona like a physical blow, reminding her why she had once loved this place so fiercely, and why leaving had hurt so much. Movement at the edge of the property caught her eye. Fiona squinted into the gathering twilight, then reached for the binoculars she'd left hanging on the porch rail that morning. The black Mustang had returned its coat, gleaming like polished onyx in the fading light. It stood motionless at the exact spot where she'd seen it earlier, staring toward the house with that same unnerving intensity. Fiona lowered the binoculars, an odd sense of connection tugging at her. Without conscious decision, she set down her whiskey, grabbed her jacket, and headed toward the fence line. The horse watched her approach, ears pricked forward, muscles tensed as if ready to flee. Yet it remained even as Fiona drew within 30 yards. "Hey there," she called softly, stopping at a respectful distance. "You're a long way from your herd." The Mustang snorted, pawing at the frozen ground. Now that she was closer, Fiona could see its eyes weren't just blue. They were an almost supernatural shade, like glacial ice caught in sunlight. "What are you doing here?" she asked, feeling foolish but unable to stop herself. Something about this animal demanded acknowledgement. The Mustang took 3 deliberate steps to the right, then turned its head to look behind itself before facing Fiona again. The message seemed clear. "Follow me." "I can't just wander off into the wilderness at sunset," Fiona told it. "Unlike you, I need flashlights and proper footwear." The horse tossed its head mane, catching the last rays of sunlight. Then, with one final penetrating look, it turned and cantered away into the trees. Fiona stayed by the fence until darkness swallowed the last glimpse of the animal. Only the biting cold finally drove her back inside, where the empty house seemed even emptier than before. She dreamed of the Mustang that night, of riding bareback across moonlit fields, the wind in her hair, a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. She woke just before dawn, the dream so vivid she half expected to find pine needles in her hair. Instead, she found an email from Emma, the first direct communication in 5 years. "I heard about Grandpa. I'm sorry. I know you two weren't close these past years, but he loved you. He kept every magazine with your photos. I'm working at the Tribune in Bristol. If you need anything while you're in Montana, let me know." Emma Fiona stared at the screen, reading and rereading the brief message. Her daughter's words were polite, distant, offering the minimum courtesy without opening the door to real connection. Exactly what Fiona deserved. She began several responses, deleting each one. What could she say that wouldn't sound hollow? "I'm sorry I missed your graduation. I'm sorry I missed everything. I'm sorry I was so afraid of becoming my father that I became something worse." In the end, she settled for simple gratitude. "Thank you, Emma. I appreciate it. I'll only be here for a week sorting things out. How are you doing at the Tribune?" She hit send before she could overthink it, then forced herself to set the phone aside and start her day. The black Mustang was waiting by the barn when she stepped outside, coffee and hand camera finally slung over her shoulder. The sight stopped Fiona mid-stride. In the clear morning light, the animal was even more magnificent, powerfully built, with the lean muscle of a creature that lived by its wits and speed. Fiona raised her camera, slowly, expecting the movement to startle the horse. Instead, the Mustang seemed to pose, turning slightly to show its profile, head raised proudly. "Well, aren't you photogenic?" Fiona murmured, adjusting her settings. She took several shots, marveling at how the horse remained still, almost as if it understood what she was doing. Only when she lowered the camera did the Mustang move, taking several steps toward the old stable, before looking back at her expectantly. Curious now, Fiona followed at a distance. The stable had been empty for years since her father sold his last riding horse. It smelled of old hay and dust sunlight streaming through gaps in the weathered boards. The Mustang stopped at the entrance, refusing to enter the human structure, but repeatedly looking toward a specific stall. "What is it? What are you trying to show me?" Fiona asked, slipping past the animal into the cool shadows of the stable. The stall in question had been her father's favorite geldings once upon a time. Fiona approached it cautiously, unsure what she expected to find. Nothing seemed amiss, just old straw cobwebs and the lingering scent of horses long gone. She was about to turn away when she noticed a slight difference in the color of the wooden planks along one wall. Fiona ran her hand over the surface, feeling a nearly imperceptible seam. Pressing experimentally, she felt the board give slightly. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered. The hidden compartment was small but deep. Inside lay an oilskin package tied with twine. Fiona withdrew it carefully, glancing back toward the stable entrance, where the black Mustang still stood watching. "How did you know this was here?" she asked, but the horse merely tossed its head, as if impatient for her to examine her find. The package contained an old leather-bound journal, a folded map yellowed with age, and a small brass key. Fiona opened the journal first, immediately recognizing her father's precise handwriting. The first entry was dated 3 months earlier, October 15th. "Met with Catherine again today. She showed me her paintings of the valley from the 1940s, before the first dam, before the Newcrest mining operation. The original boundaries are clearly visible. If these paintings are accurate, and I believe they are, at least 200 acres of what Bennett claims is Oak Ridge property actually belongs to the original homesteaders' descendants, including the ridge where they're planning the main lodge. Catherine believes they know about the original deeds. That's why they're rushing construction before anyone can challenge their ownership." Fiona flipped through more entries, each detailing her father's investigation into the Oak Ridge development. He'd been systematically building a case that the company had falsified land records, ignored environmental regulations, and possibly bribed local officials. The final entry sent a chill down her spine, January 8th. Someone followed me back from town today. Dark SUV tinted windows. Stayed back just enough to claim coincidence, but I know better. Called Jack to arrange testing. If my suspicions are correct, they've already started preliminary work at the site work that violates at least 6 EPA regulations. The key is in finding Catherine's original photographs. They prove everything. I've moved my notes to the stable, the one place they won't think to look. If anything happens to me, Midnight will know what to do. He always does. Midnight. Fiona looked up from the journal toward the stable entrance, but the Mustang had vanished. She hurried outside, scanning the property, but there was no sign of the black horse anywhere. Midnight will know what to do. Her father had named the Mustang, had known it somehow, but that was impossible. Wild horses didn't befriend humans, didn't come when called, didn't lead people to hidden compartments. Unless this wasn't a normal horse. Fiona returned to the house, the journal and map clutched tightly in her hands. She spread the map across the kitchen table, studying it closely. It showed Eagle Valley as it had been in 1948, with property lines marked in faded ink. Several areas were circled in her father's red pen, including a ridge overlooking the valley, presumably where Oak Ridge planned to build their resort. Attached to the map was a small faded photograph. Fiona's breath caught as she examined it. The photo showed 3 people standing in front of a rustic cabin, a much younger Catherine Blackwood, distinguished by her striking white hair, Fiona's grandfather, James Morgan, and a third man she didn't recognize. They were smiling arms linked in camaraderie. But what made Fiona's heart race was the figure in the background, a black Mustang with a star-shaped patch on its forehead, watching from the tree line. The same distinctive markings as the horse she'd just seen. The same intelligent stance. The photo was dated June 1948, 75 years ago. It was impossible. No horse lived that long. Yet the animal in the photograph was identical to Midnight, same coloring, same marking, same penetrating gaze. Fiona set the photo down with trembling fingers, her mind racing. What was she missing? What had her father discovered that was worth breaking into his office for? And why did she suddenly feel like she was being watched? The knock on her front door made her jump. Hastily, she gathered the journal and map, hiding them in a kitchen drawer before answering. A man in an expensive suit stood on her porch. His silver hair perfectly styled, his smile practiced and warm. Behind him idled a black Range Rover with tinted windows. Ms. Morgan Maxwell, Bennett Oak Ridge Ventures. He extended a manicured hand. I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to personally express my condolences about your father. Fiona shook his hand automatically, her journalist's instincts immediately on high alert. CEOs didn't make condolence calls to random locals. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That's very thoughtful. Thomas was a respected member of this community. His passion for local history was admirable even when we occasionally found ourselves on opposite sides of progress. Bennett's smile remained fixed, but his eyes, cold and assessing, scanned the entryway behind her. May I come in? I have a proposition that might interest you. Every instinct screamed caution, but refusing would only arouse suspicion. Fiona stepped aside, leading Bennett to the living room, while mentally calculating how long it would take to retrieve the concealed journal, if necessary. Bennett settled into her father's armchair, as if he belonged there, crossing one leg over the other. Beautiful property you have here. 30 acres, if I recall correctly. You seem well informed about my father's estate. I make it my business to know the valley. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Especially properties with such strategic value. There it was, the real reason for his visit. I understand you're planning to sell, Bennett continued smoothly. The local market can be unpredictable. Long wait times, complicated escrow processes. He named a figure that made Fiona's eyebrows rise involuntarily. Oak Ridge would be prepared to offer that cash with closing in 2 weeks. No inspections necessary, as is. The amount was nearly double the market value. No sane businessman made such an offer without an ulterior motive. That's very generous, Fiona said carefully. May I ask why Whispering Pines is so valuable to Oak Ridge? It's not exactly resort property. Bennett waved a dismissive hand. Water rights mainly. Your property has access to Eagle Creek, which feeds the river where we're developing. Having contiguous ownership simplifies our environmental compliance. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. I'll need time to consider it, Fiona said. I've only just arrived. Of course. Bennett stood straightening his jacket. Take all the time you need. Well until Friday. That's when our offer expires. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. Opportunity waits for no one in this business. At the door, he paused. One more thing, Miss Morgan. I understand you've been speaking with Jack Harper. The casual mention of Jack sent warning bells ringing in Fiona's mind. The vet, yes, he was checking on my father's cat. Bennett nodded as if this confirmed something. Jack's relatively new to Silverwood, still learning our ways. Sometimes his enthusiasm for environmental causes leads him to misinterpret situations. If he shared any concerns about our development, I'd be happy to clarify the facts. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. We know who you're talking to. We're watching. I'll keep that in mind, Fiona said neutrally. As Bennett's Range Rover disappeared down the driveway, Fiona leaned against the closed door, heart pounding. Bennett hadn't come to offer condolences or even to make a generous offer on the ranch. He'd come to assess whether she knew what her father had discovered, whether she was a threat, and he'd let her know she was being watched. Fiona retrieved the journal and map from their hiding place, now acutely aware of their potential danger. Her father had believed these documents proved something illegal about the Oak Ridge development, something worth killing for if Jack's suspicions about Thomas's death were correct. She needed to find Catherine Blackwood. The journal mentioned original photographs that could prove the land claims. If Catherine had those, they might be the evidence needed to challenge Oak Ridge's development. But first, she needed to secure what she'd already found. Fiona photographed every page of the journal and the map, uploading the images to her secure cloud storage. Then she placed the originals in her camera bag, which never left her side on assignments. Whatever happened, she would ensure her father's research survived. As evening approached, Fiona found herself drawn back to the fence line, scanning the tree line for any sign of midnight. The black Mustang had led her to her father's hidden cache, had somehow known exactly where to look. Midnight will know what to do. He always does. The words from her father's journal echoed in her mind. Thomas had trusted this horse, had given it a name, had believed it could. What understand human problems lead his daughter to evidence after his death? It sounded insane. Yet Fiona couldn't deny what she'd experienced: the horse's human-like behavior, its deliberate actions, those uncanny blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. And that photograph from 1948, a horse identical to Midnight standing in the same watchful pose, as if it had been guarding Catherine Blackwood and her companions even then. As darkness fell, Fiona made her decision. Tomorrow she would find Catherine Blackwood and get answers about the land claims, about her father's death, and about Midnight. She was setting her alarm when her phone chimed with a text message. Unknown number, you found his journal. Be careful who you trust. They're watching the house. Meet me tomorrow, Miller's Diner, 8 a.m. J. Jack Harper, warning her that she was under surveillance. Fiona's skin prickled with unease as she gazed out at the darkened property. Her eyes watching her, even now from where she double-checked the locks, drew the curtains and tried to sleep. But her dreams were troubled visions of her father calling for help while she stood frozen, unable to move. Of Midnight racing through flames. Of Emma turning away, disappointment etched on her face. Fiona woke before dawn, heart pounding, sheets twisted around her legs. The room was gray with pre-dawn light, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, a sound both beautiful and haunting in its loneliness. She rose quickly, dressing in layers for the January cold. As she prepared to leave for her meeting with Jack, Fiona gathered her camera bag, checking that the journal and map were secure inside. Whatever happened next, she needed to be ready. The sun was just cresting the eastern mountains when Fiona stepped onto the porch, keys in hand. Frost silvered the landscape, transforming ordinary fences and trees into crystalline sculptures. Her breath formed clouds in the frigid air. She was halfway to her car when she saw the envelope pinned to her windshield. Heart hammering, Fiona approached cautiously. No footprints marked the frozen ground around the vehicle. Whoever had left this had been careful to conceal their presence. With gloved fingers, she removed the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typewritten words. Your father died because he wouldn't stop looking. The horse is not what you think. Leave Silverwood today if you want to live. Fiona's blood ran cold. No signature, no identifiable marks. Just a clear threat linking her father's death to his investigation and to midnight. As if summoned by her thoughts, a soft nickering sound came from beyond the barn. Fiona turned sharply, her heart leaping when she spotted Midnight standing at the edge of the property. The Mustang's dark coat was stark against the snow-dusted landscape, steam rising from its nostrils in the cold air. It stared at her with those impossibly blue eyes, then deliberately turned and took several steps toward the mountain trail before looking back. "Follow me." The unspoken invitation was clear. As was the choice Fiona now faced: heed the anonymous warning and flee Silverwood, or follow a mysterious horse into the wilderness in search of answers about her father's death. For 12 years, Fiona Morgan had been running from this town, from her past, from the parts of herself she couldn't bear to face. Always moving forward, never looking back. Always choosing the escape. Not this time. Fiona tucked the threatening note into her pocket, returned to the house long enough to grab extra supplies, and leave a message for Jack explaining her delay, then walked deliberately toward the waiting Mustang. "All right, Midnight," she said quietly. "Show me what my father found." The black horse snorted once as if in approval, then turned and began walking up the mountain trail, stopping occasionally to ensure Fiona followed. Behind them, a dark SUV with tinted windows pulled discreetly onto the road leading to Whispering Pines Ranch, its driver speaking urgently into a cell phone. The hunt had begun. Fiona followed Midnight up the mountain trail, the frigid morning air burning her lungs. The path was barely visible under patches of snow and fallen pine needles, but the black Mustang navigated it with unwavering confidence. She'd hiked these mountains as a child with her father, learning the names of trees and birds, tracking elk through fresh snow. But this trail was unfamiliar, narrower, less traveled, winding through sections of forest she'd never explored. "Where are you taking me?" she asked after nearly an hour of steady climbing. Midnight simply flicked an ear back at her voice but maintained his deliberate pace. The horse moved with purpose, stopping occasionally to ensure she was still following those uncanny blue eyes checking her progress. By mid-morning, they had climbed high enough that Silverwood was visible in the valley below, a collection of toy-sized buildings nestled against the river. From this height, the changes to the landscape became apparent. Where Fiona remembered unbroken forest, a large section had been cleared near the northern ridge. Earth-moving equipment dotted the bare ground like yellow insects. The Oak Ridge construction site. Fiona pulled out her camera, zooming in to capture details of the development. The work appeared to be in early stages: foundation trenches, temporary structures, access roads carved into the mountainside. More interesting was what surrounded it: a security fence with regular patrols, unusual for a simple resort project. Midnight waited impatiently while she photographed, pawing at the ground and tossing his head. When she finally lowered the camera, he snorted as if to say, "Finish sightseeing," before continuing along the trail. The path narrowed further as they entered an older section of forest where ancient pines towered overhead, their branches weaving together to form a natural cathedral. The temperature dropped in their shadow, and sounds became muffled beneath the thick carpet of needles. Fiona felt a growing sense of otherworldliness, as if she'd stepped through some invisible boundary into a place where normal rules didn't apply. The feeling intensified when she spotted carvings on some of the trees, symbols she didn't recognize, weathered by decades of exposure. Midnight slowed his pace, moving more cautiously now, his ears swiveled, constantly alert to sounds Fiona couldn't detect. She found herself matching his caution, placing her feet more carefully, speaking only in whispers. "What is this place?" she murmured, more to herself than the horse. To her surprise, Midnight stopped, completely turning to look at her with those penetrating blue eyes. For a moment, Fiona could have sworn she saw something almost human in that gaze, a depth of understanding that sent chills down her spine. Then the horse looked deliberately at a massive pine to their right. Carved into its trunk was a symbol more elaborate than the others, a spiraling pattern surrounding what appeared to be a horse in mid-leap. Fiona approached it slowly, running her fingers over the weathered lines. The carving was old, the edges softened by time, yet still clearly visible. Native American, she wondered aloud, trying to recall her father's lessons about the indigenous tribes that had once inhabited these mountains. Midnight nickered softly, then continued forward. The trail began to descend now, winding down into a small sheltered valley hidden within the larger mountain range. As they emerged from the dense forest, Fiona gasped. Below them lay a meadow dusted with snow through which a narrow stream wound like a silver ribbon. At its center stood a small cabin, smoke curling from its stone chimney. The structure seemed to have grown organically from the landscape-weathered logs, blending with the surrounding pines, its roof covered in moss and lichen. And everywhere, hanging from tree branches mounted beside the cabin door, propped against rocks near the stream, were paintings. Dozens of them, their colors vivid against the winter landscape. Midnight increased his pace, leading Fiona down toward the cabin with newfound eagerness. As they approached, the door swung open, revealing a woman so ancient she seemed carved from the same weathered wood as her home. Catherine Blackwood stood barely 5 feet tall, her body bent with age but radiating a fierce vitality. A thick silver braid hung over one shoulder of her deerskin jacket, and her dark eyes, set in a face mapped with wrinkles, assessed Fiona with piercing intelligence. "So," she said, her voice surprisingly strong, "Thomas's daughter finally decided to come home." Midnight trotted the final distance to Catherine, nuzzling the old woman's outstretched hand with obvious affection. Catherine stroked his nose, murmuring something too low for Fiona to hear. "You know who I am," Fiona said, approaching more slowly. "Of course I do. You have your mother's face and your father's stubbornness." Catherine gestured to the Mustang. "And Midnight has chosen you just as he chose them." Fiona's mind reeled with questions, but Catherine simply turned and entered the cabin, calling over her shoulder, "Well, come in if you're coming. The coffee won't stay hot forever." And inside the cabin was a single large room with a loft accessible by ladder. Every surface was covered with art supplies, books, or more paintings. A wood stove radiated welcome heat, and the scent of coffee mingled with pine resin and oil paints. "Sit," Catherine ordered, pouring dark coffee into a handmade ceramic mug. "You look half frozen." Fiona settled onto a worn armchair, wrapping her cold fingers around the offered mug. "You knew my father was researching the Oak Ridge development?" It wasn't a question, but Catherine nodded anyway. "I knew everything Thomas was doing. We worked together for years documenting the truth about this valley." She fixed Fiona with that penetrating gaze. The truth someone killed him to conceal. The blunt statement hung in the air between them. Fiona had suspected it since finding her father's journal, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly made her stomach clench. "You believe he was murdered?" "I know he was." Catherine moved to a chest near the wood stove, opening it to reveal neatly organized files. "Thomas came to me 3 days before he died. He discovered evidence that Bennett was polluting the groundwater with preliminary mining operations. Not for a resort that's just the cover. They're after rare earth minerals." She extracted a folder, handing it to Fiona. Inside were water test results showing elevated levels of heavy metals, along with photographs of drilling equipment hidden behind the construction fencing. "Thomas took these samples himself," Catherine continued, "had them tested in a lab in Bristol under a false name. When the results came back, he knew he had proof of illegal mining operations. He called me that night, planning to take everything to the state environmental agency. And 2 days later, he was dead of a heart attack." Fiona finished grimly. Catherine nodded, lowering herself into a chair opposite Fiona. "Bennett has the sheriff, the mayor, half the town council in his pocket, all looking the other way while he prepares to strip mine the most pristine wilderness in the state." Fiona studied the water test results, recognizing the potential environmental catastrophe they represented. Her father had uncovered something far more significant than falsified property lines. He discovered corporate crime on a massive scale. "But why my father? He was retired, just one man." Catherine's eyes softened slightly. "Thomas wasn't just one man. He was the third generation of Morgans to stand against the exploitation of this valley. Your grandfather James died fighting the first dam project in the 1950s. Another accident. And your father had something Bennett feared more than protests or petitions. What evidence? Historical documentation proving that much of the land Bennett claims belongs to the original homesteaders' descendants." Catherine gestured to the paintings surrounding them. "Including these." For the first time, Fiona truly looked at the artwork covering the cabin walls. They weren't just landscapes, they were historical records. Detailed paintings of Eagle Valley dating back to the 1940s, each meticulously labeled with dates and locations. Together, they created a visual documentation of the valley's transformation over decades. You painted all these? Fiona asked, awed by the scope of the collection. Over 60 years of work. When I first came to Eagle Valley in 1948, I was 21, fresh out of art school back east. Fell in love with these mountains. Catherine's gaze grew distant. And with Joseph Blackwood, who taught me to see the valley through native eyes, his people had lived here for generations before white settlers arrived. She rose with surprising agility for her age, moving to a specific painting near the window. It showed Eagle Valley as it had been in the late 1940s, the original homestead's clearly visible property boundaries marked by distinctive features. These paintings are legal evidence admissible in court to establish historical boundaries when survey markers have been moved or records falsified, which is exactly what Bennett's father did in the 1950s and what Maxwell continues today. Fiona joined Catherine at the painting, her photographer's eye appreciating the precise detail. This is why my father wanted to find you. Thomas recognized the value of visual documentation, just as you do with your camera. Catherine fixed Fiona with that penetrating gaze again. It's no coincidence that Midnight chose 3 generations of image makers to help protect this valley. Those who bear witness through art are the most dangerous to men like Bennett. At the mention of Midnight, Fiona glanced toward the cabin door. The black Mustang was visible through the window, grazing contentedly in the meadow snow. About Midnight, she began, unsure how to phrase the impossible question. Catherine smiled, a knowing light in her eyes. You've seen the photograph from 1948, the one with me, your grandfather, and Joseph. Fiona nodded slowly. The horse in that photo, it's identical to Midnight, but that's impossible. No horse lives for 75 years. Not impossible, just not explainable by your understanding of the world. Catherine moved to another painting, this one showing a black Mustang with a star-shaped mark surrounded by what appeared to be native warriors. The Blackfoot people who lived in these mountains believed that some animals carried the spirits of the land itself. They called the black horse with blue eyes, keeper of the valley. In each generation, one such horse would appear when the land was threatened, guiding those chosen to protect it. Fiona stared at the painting dated 1890. The horse depicted was unmistakably Midnight, same marking, same intelligent gaze. You're saying Midnight is what reincarnated immortal? Catherine shrugged. I'm saying there are mysteries in this world that defy simple explanation. What matters is that Midnight has chosen you, just as he chose your father and grandfather before you. He led you to me because you need to understand what you're facing and what's at stake. Fiona's mind struggled against the supernatural implications. Yet she couldn't deny what she'd seen with her own eyes. Midnight's human-like intelligence, his deliberate actions in leading her to hidden evidence, his appearance in photographs spanning generations. Let's say I accept that Midnight is special, Fiona said carefully. What does he want from me? What am I supposed to do with this information? Continue your father's work. Stop Bennett before he destroys Eagle Valley forever. Catherine returned to the chest, extracting a leather portfolio. These are the originals of my most important paintings, showing the valley's true boundaries. Thomas and I made copies, but Bennett's men have been searching for these. They're the final piece of evidence needed to challenge Oak Ridge's land claims. Fiona hesitated, the weight of responsibility suddenly overwhelming. I'm just a wildlife photographer, not an environmental activist. I'm only here to settle my father's estate and leave. Catherine's expression hardened. That's what your father said when he first returned after your mother died, that he was just passing through. But the truth has a way of demanding acknowledgement once you've seen it. She held out the portfolio. Midnight chose you for a reason, Fiona. The question is whether you'll honor that choice or run away again. The words struck like a physical blow. Run away. Isn't that exactly what she'd been doing for 12 years? Running from this town, from her father's silence, from her own failures as a mother to Emma? Before Fiona could respond, Midnight's shrill whinny pierced the air outside, a sound of alarm that sent Catherine instantly to the window. Someone's coming, the old woman said sharply, scanning the tree line. We need to move, now. Fiona joined her at the window, spotting what had alarmed Midnight, 2 figures in dark clothing, making their way through the forest toward the cabin. Even at this distance, the rifles they carried were unmistakable. Bennett's men, Catherine confirmed grimly. They've been watching the trails, hoping I'd lead them to the paintings. She thrust the portfolio into Fiona's hands. Take these. Get to Jack Harper in town. He knows what to do next. What about you? I can handle myself. Catherine moved swiftly for her age-gathering essentials into a small pack. There's a back trail that leads down to the creek. If you follow it east, it will take you to the old mining road. Midnight knows the way. As if on cue, the black Mustang appeared at the back window, pawing urgently at the ground. Go, Catherine urged, pressing a small revolver into Fiona's free hand. I'll create a diversion. And Fiona, her eyes locked with the younger woman's. Trust Midnight. No matter what happens, no matter how strange things seem, he's protected this valley longer than any of us. Heart pounding, Fiona secured the portfolio in her backpack alongside her father's journal, checked that her camera was safely stowed, and slipped out the back door. Midnight waited just beyond, tense and alert, his blue eyes scanning the forest. Catherine's voice followed her. Remember, your father died protecting these mountains. Don't let his sacrifice be for nothing. The words echoed in Fiona's mind as she followed Midnight down a nearly invisible path that skirted the edge of the meadow before plunging back into dense forest. Behind her, she heard Catherine's cabin door open, the old woman's voice raised in greeting to the approaching men. Well, if it isn't Maxwell Bennett's errand boys, come to visit an old lady without even bringing flowers? Your mother's raised you better than that, Shirley. Then the forest swallowed Fiona, and Catherine's voice faded, replaced by the soft sounds of Midnight's hooves on packed earth and the rapid beating of her own heart. They traveled swiftly, Midnight setting a pace that challenged Fiona to keep up. The horse seemed to know exactly where the path lay, even when it disappeared beneath snow or crossed rocky terrain. Several times he changed direction abruptly, as if sensing danger ahead. After what felt like hours, they emerged onto a wider track, the old mining road Catherine had mentioned. Fiona paused to catch her breath, checking her phone. No signal as expected in these remote mountains. Which way now? She asked Midnight, feeling only slightly ridiculous for consulting a horse. Midnight snorted, tossing his head toward the east before setting off at a brisk trot. Fiona followed the weight of the portfolio, a constant reminder of what was at stake. The mining road eventually connected with a more established Forest Service route, which in turn led to a paved county road. As civilization reappeared, Fiona grew more cautious, aware that Bennett likely had people watching for her. Her suspicion was confirmed when a sheriff's department SUV drove slowly past the deputy inside, eyeing her with obvious interest. Fiona ducked her head, grateful for the wooded area alongside the road that offered some cover. Midnight seemed to sense her unease, leading her onto a parallel game trail that kept them hidden from the road while still making progress toward town. The horse's instincts were uncanny, his awareness of potential threats far exceeding normal animal perception. By late afternoon, they had circled around to approach Silverwood from the west, avoiding the main roads. Fiona's legs ached from hours of hiking, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. But more pressing was the need to find Jack Harper and deliver Catherine's paintings. Midnight stopped at the edge of town, nickering softly. The message was clear: this was as far as he could go. Urban environments were no place for a wild Mustang, especially one being hunted by Bennett's men. Thank you, Fiona said, resting her hand briefly on the horse's powerful neck the first time she'd actually touched him. His coat was warm beneath her fingers, his muscles tense with barely contained energy. Midnight held her gaze for a long moment, those blue eyes seeming to convey a message beyond words. Then he turned and disappeared into the forest with fluid grace, leaving Fiona alone at the threshold of Silverwood. She made her way cautiously through back streets, avoiding the town center, where she might be recognized. Jack's veterinary clinic was on the outskirts, a modest building with attached stables for larger animal patients. Fiona approached from behind, relieved to see Jack's truck parked at the rear entrance. She knocked softly on the back door, constantly scanning for observers. Jack's surprised face appeared moments later. Fiona! Thank God! He pulled her quickly inside, locking the door behind her. I've been trying to reach you all day. Where have you been? Visiting Catherine Blackwood. Fiona set her backpack on an examination table, extracting the portfolio. She gave me these to bring to you. Said you'd know what to do with them. Jack's eyes widened at the sight of Catherine's paintings. She finally trusted you with the originals. He examined them reverently, his expression growing grim. These prove everything Thomas suspected about the falsified boundaries. Combined with the water tests, we have enough to request a state investigation. We need to move fast, Fiona urged. Bennett's men were closing in on Catherine's cabin when I left, And I think the sheriff's department is looking for me. They are. Cooper put out an APB claiming you assaulted one of Bennett's security guards. Jack's mouth twisted bitterly. Standard tactic, fabricate charges to discredit witnesses. Fiona's stomach dropped. They're setting me up for what? Anything that sticks. Bennett's desperate to stop these paintings from reaching the state authorities. Jack gathered the artwork carefully. We need to get you somewhere safe while I make copies and contact my friend at the environmental agency. What about Catherine? She's still up there facing Bennett's men alone. Jack's expression darkened. Catherine can handle herself better than you'd think. She's survived in these mountains for decades. He hesitated. There's something you should know about her. About your father, too. Before he could continue, the sound of a vehicle pulling up outside froze them both. Jack moved quickly to a window, peering through the blinds. Sheriff's deputy, he whispered, and Bennett's head of security with him. Fiona's heart raced. Is there another way out? Jack nodded, leading her through the clinic to a side door. My truck keys are on the hook. Take the service road behind the clinic. It connects to County Road 7, which will get you to Bristol. I have a colleague there who can hide you until I secure the paintings. What about you? I'll stall them, claim I haven't seen you. He scribbled an address on a scrap of paper. Go to this place in Bristol. Ask for Dr. Sarah Collins. She knows about Bennett and will help you. The knocking at the front door grew more insistent. Jack handed Fiona his keys. Whatever happens, these paintings need to reach the state environmental office. It's what Thomas would have wanted. Fiona hesitated, struck by the realization that she was now fully committed to her father's cause. There was no going back to her carefully constructed life of detached observation. She had become a participant in this fight, whether she'd intended to or not. Jack, what were you going to tell me about Catherine? About my father. Jack glanced nervously toward the front of the clinic, where the knocking had turned to pounding. There's no time now, but ask Catherine about the prophecy, about the 3 witnesses. His expression grew urgent. And Fiona, trust Midnight, no matter what happens. The same advice Catherine had given. Before Fiona could press for details, Jack was ushering her out the side door, closing it firmly behind her. She slipped into Jack's truck, heart hammering as she heard voices from the front of the clinic. Starting the engine, she navigated carefully down the service road, lights off despite the gathering dusk. Only when she reached County Road 7 did Fiona allow herself to breathe normally again. She was officially a fugitive, now fleeing from fabricated charges, carrying evidence that could destroy Maxwell Bennett's plans for Eagle Valley. And somewhere in the darkness, she knew Midnight was watching, guiding, protecting, just as he had for generations of her family. The drive to Bristol took nearly an hour, the winding mountain road demanding all of Fiona's concentration. She used the time to process everything she learned: Bennett's true intentions for strip mining Eagle Valley, the historical patterns of corruption and resistance, her own family's role in protecting the mountains, and the impossible reality of Midnight, a horse that seemed to transcend normal animal limitations, appearing throughout the valley's history at moments of crisis. None of it made logical sense. Yet Fiona couldn't deny the evidence of her own experiences. Midnight had led her to her father's hidden journal, had guided her to Catherine, had helped her evade Bennett's men. The horse possessed an intelligence and purpose that defied conventional explanation. Bristol was larger than Silverwood, a small city that served as the region's commercial hub. Fiona navigated to the address Jack had provided, a modest veterinary hospital on the outskirts. At this hour, only emergency services would be operating. Dr. Sarah Collins proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with cropped, gray hair and shrewd eyes that assessed Fiona quickly. Jack called ahead, she said by way of greeting. Said you needed a place to lay low until morning. She gestured Fiona inside. You can sleep in the staff room. It's not fancy, but it's private and secure. Thank you, Fiona said, exhaustion suddenly washing over her. I don't want to put you at risk. Bennett has no jurisdiction in Bristol, Sarah interrupted, and I've known Jack Harper since vet school. If he says you're fighting the good fight, that's good enough for me. She studied Fiona more closely. You look like you could use some food and about 12 hours of sleep. Fiona managed a tired smile. Both sound amazing right now. No. While Sarah ordered takeout from a local diner, Fiona used the clinic's computer to check her email, hoping for some connection to the outside world. Among the usual professional correspondence was another message from Emma Mom. I've been trying to call you all day. Sheriff Cooper came to the Tribune office asking questions about you and Grandpa. Said you're wanted for assault and trespassing. What the hell is going on? Call me, please. Fiona stared at the screen, a complex mix of emotions churning within her. Emma was reaching out concerned despite their years of estrangement, and Cooper was already extending his intimidation tactics to include her daughter. She typed a quick reply, Emma, I'm safe but can't call right now. Cooper's charges are false part of a cover-up involving Oak Ridge Ventures. Your grandfather discovered they're planning illegal mining operations that would destroy Eagle Valley. He was collecting evidence when he died. I know how this sounds, but I believe he was murdered because of what he found. I'm working with Jack Harper to get the evidence to state authorities. Please be careful what you say to Cooper or anyone connected to Maxwell Bennett. I'll explain everything soon. Love Mom Fiona hesitated before hitting send, aware that this brief message contained more honest communication than she'd managed with her daughter in years. The wall of professional detachment she'd built around herself, the defense mechanism that had allowed her to document suffering without experiencing it, was crumbling in the face of her father's legacy. She added one final line. I'm sorry for all the years I kept you at a distance. I was wrong. After sending the email, Fiona checked her professional accounts, finding increasingly urgent messages from her agent about the abandoned Alaska project. With a pang of regret but newfound clarity, she sent a brief note explaining she needed to extend her leave for family matters. For the first time in her career, the thought of missing a deadline, of disappointing a client, seemed insignificant compared to the larger issues at stake. Sarah returned with food and Fiona ate mechanically, her mind still processing the day's revelations. After her meal, exhaustion overtook her, and she collapsed onto the small couch in the staff room, falling into deep sleep almost instantly. Her dreams were vivid and disjointed images of midnight racing through flames, her father calling her name, Catherine Blackwood, painting with brushes that drip blood instead of paint, and throughout the sensation of being watched by eyes that saw beyond normal human perception. Fiona woke with a start just before dawn, heart racing, the dream images still vivid. Something had disturbed her sleep, a sound of presence. The clinic was silent around her, the pre-dawn darkness absolute. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had happened, that she'd missed a crucial message. Moving to the window, Fiona peered into the parking lot. Jack's truck sat where she'd left it, undisturbed. The lot was empty, otherwise the street beyond quiet. Then she saw a figure at the edge of the trees across the street. Even in the dim light, the silhouette was unmistakable. Midnight. The black Mustang stood motionless, watching the clinic with those uncanny blue eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. As soon as Fiona spotted him, he tossed his head, urgently pawing at the ground. Something's wrong. The certainty struck her with the force of physical knowledge. Midnight wouldn't have followed her to Bristol, wouldn't have revealed himself in an urban environment unless the situation was dire. Fiona dressed quickly, gathering her belongings. She scribbled a note of thanks for Sarah not wanting to wake her host at this hour. Whatever was happening, instinct told her she needed to get back to Eagle Valley immediately. Outside, the air was bitter cold, her breath forming clouds as she approached Midnight cautiously. The Mustang remained still, allowing her to draw near his eyes, never leaving her face. What is it? Fiona asked softly. What's happened? Midnight snorted, turning his body to indicate the direction they'd come from. The message was clear. They needed to return to Silverwood. Fiona hesitated only briefly before climbing into Jack's truck. She'd trust the horse's instincts, as both Jack and Catherine had advised. If Midnight had come for her, the situation must be urgent. She started the engine, rolling slowly out of the parking lot. Midnight paced alongside for a moment, then broke into a trot, heading for the road back to Eagle Valley. Fiona followed, keeping the truck at a speed the horse could match, while staying hidden in the tree line that ran parallel to the highway. Dawn broke as they traveled, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Under other circumstances, Fiona would have stopped to photograph the spectacular light. Now she focused solely on following Midnight's guidance, a sense of foreboding growing with each mile. They were halfway back to Silverwood when her phone chimed with an incoming text. Reception was spotty in the mountains, but this message had managed to get through. It was from Jack. Catherine's cabin burned last night. She's missing. Bennett claiming accident, but we know better. Don't come back to clinic, not safe. Meet at our spot from yesterday's text. Midnight knows. Fiona's blood ran cold. Catherine's cabin with its irreplaceable collection of historical paintings destroyed, the old woman herself missing, possibly injured or worse, and Jack's cryptic reference to midnight confirming the horse's role as guide and messenger. She checked the rearview mirror, half expecting to see pursuit. The road remained empty, but Fiona couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out for Catherine, for Eagle Valley, perhaps for herself. Midnight had disappeared from view, but Fiona trusted he was still nearby, monitoring her progress. She continued toward Silverwood, mind racing through possible next steps. She had copies of her father's journal, Catherine's portfolio of key paintings, and the water test results. Enough evidence to request a state investigation if she could get it to the proper authorities. But first she needed to find Catherine and to understand the prophecy Jack had mentioned about the three witnesses. Something told her these pieces were connected to the larger mystery surrounding Midnight and her family's role in protecting Eagle Valley. As she approached the turnoff to Miller's Diner, presumably the meeting spot Jack had referenced, Fiona spotted Midnight waiting at the side road. The horse nickered softly as she pulled alongside his manor, somehow conveying the urgency of their situation. Fiona parked Jack's truck in the diner's nearly empty lot, scanning for any sign of the veterinarian. A few early morning customers occupied booths inside, but Jack wasn't among them. Instead, to her shock, she spotted Emma sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee. Her daughter, here in Silverwood. Fiona froze, unprepared for this encounter. Emma hadn't seen her yet, her attention focused on her phone. There was still time to retreat to avoid this confrontation until Fiona had sorted out the more pressing dangers. But Midnight had other ideas. The Mustang emerged from the tree line, trotting directly across the parking lot in full view of the diner windows, and stopping directly in Emma's line of sight. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes widening at the sight of the magnificent black horse staring intently at her. Then her gaze shifted, following Midnight's deliberate look toward where Fiona stood frozen beside Jack's truck. Their eyes met through the glass, mother and daughter separated by 5 years of silence and 12 years of emotional distance. Emma's expression changed rapidly, surprise, wariness, then determination. She set down her coffee and moved toward the door. Midnight, having orchestrated this reunion, retreated to the edge of the parking lot, watching with those knowing blue eyes as Fiona steeled herself to face both her daughter and the escalating crisis that threatened everything her father had died to protect. This wasn't just about environmental activism anymore. It had become personal, a reckoning with her past, her family legacy, and the mysterious bond between the Morgans and the spirit horse that had guided them for generations. As Emma pushed open the diner door and stepped into the cold morning air, Fiona knew there was no turning back. Whatever came next would change both their lives forever. Emma Morgan stood in the parking lot, her breath visible in the cold morning air. At 25, she was the spitting image of Fiona at that age, same determined jaw, same analytical gaze. Only her dark hair, cut in a practical bob, instead of Fiona's longer style, marked a deliberate difference between mother and daughter. 5 years of silence stretched between them like a chasm. Fiona moved forward hesitantly, suddenly aware of all the birthdays, graduations, and milestones she'd missed. All the times she'd chosen a remote assignment over reconciliation. "You got my email," she said finally. Emma's expression remained guarded. "I got your email. Then I got a visit from Sheriff Cooper asking more questions about you and Grandpa." She glanced at Jack's truck. "Where's Dr. Harper? We were supposed to meet here. I don't know where he is." Fiona's concern deepened. "How did you know to come?" "Jack called me last night, said you were in trouble and needed help." Emma's eyes drifted to Midnight, who remained at the edge of the lot, watching them intently. "He also said something strange about following a black horse with a star marking. I thought he was speaking metaphorically until—" She gestured toward Midnight. The Mustang nickered softly as if acknowledging being discussed. "That's Midnight," Fiona said, feeling the inadequacy of the simple introduction. "It's complicated." So Jack explained. Emma's professional journalist demeanor cracked slightly. "Mom, what's happening? Cooper's saying you assaulted someone. Bennett's security team is looking for you. And Grandpa's cabin in the mountains apparently burned down last night." Fiona's heart sank. Catherine's cabin burned. "You're sure?" Emma nodded grimly. "It's all over local news this morning. Reclusive local artist missing after cabin fire. They're calling it an accident, but it wasn't." Fiona glanced around the parking lot, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. We shouldn't talk here. Bennett has people everywhere. As if on cue, a sheriff's department SUV turned onto the main road, moving slowly in their direction. Midnight stomped his hoof sharply, tossing his head toward the forest behind the diner. We need to go. Now. Fiona grabbed Emma's arm, guiding her toward Jack's truck. I'll explain everything, but first we have to get somewhere safe. To her relief, Emma didn't argue, sliding into the passenger seat as Fiona started the engine. The sheriff's vehicle was still a quarter-mile away, the deputy inside seemingly on routine patrol rather than actively searching. Fiona pulled out of the lot and turned onto a side road following Midnight, who trotted ahead, leading them away from the main roads. The black Mustang moved with purpose, looking back occasionally to ensure they followed. So that's really happening, Emma said, watching the horse guide them. I thought Jack might be exaggerating about the horse part. Believe me, I had the same reaction. Fiona navigated the narrow road carefully. But Midnight is special. He's been helping me piece together what happened to your grandfather. In the relative safety of the moving vehicle, Fiona summarized everything she'd learned. Bennett's true mining intentions, the falsified land records, her father's evidence of environmental violations, Catherine's paintings documenting the original boundaries. Emma listened with growing alarm, her journalist's mind clearly cataloging details and connecting dots. So Grandpa was murdered because he discovered all this, and now they're after you because you have his evidence. And Catherine's paintings, the final proof needed to challenge Bennett's land claims. Fiona checked the rearview mirror, relieved to see no pursuit. She entrusted them to me yesterday, right before Bennett's men showed up at her cabin. And now her cabin's burned and she's missing. Emma's expression hardened. This is bigger than just a corrupt development deal. This is conspiracy and murder. Midnight led them deeper into the forest, eventually turning onto what appeared to be an abandoned logging road. The truck bounced over ruts and fallen branches, the path clearly untraveled for years. Where is he taking us? Emma asked, gripping the dashboard as they navigated a particularly rough section. I don't know, but every time I've trusted him so far, he's led me to something important. Fiona slowed as the road narrowed further. If Jack's in trouble, Midnight might be leading us to him. After nearly 20 minutes of increasingly difficult terrain, they reached a point where fallen trees blocked further progress. Midnight stopped, looking back expectantly. I think this is as far as we drive, Fiona said, parking the truck. We go on foot from here. They gathered their essentials, Fiona's camera bag with the crucial evidence, Emma's backpack with her laptop and reporting gear. The temperature had dropped, and dark clouds gathered overhead, promising snow before nightfall. Midnight waited patiently as they prepared, then led them along a narrow path that would have been invisible to casual observation. The horse moved with the silent grace of a wild predator, stopping occasionally to listen, changing direction twice when distant voices carried through the trees. He's avoiding Bennett's search parties, Emma whispered, observing the Mustang's behavior. He knows exactly where they are. Fiona nodded, increasingly awed by Midnight's awareness. Whatever this animal was, spirit guide, reincarnated protector, or simply an extraordinarily intelligent Mustang, his connection to the valley and its defenders was undeniable. After nearly an hour of careful hiking, they crested a small rise and found themselves looking down at a structure nestled against the base of a cliff. It appeared to be an old mining cabin, long abandoned, but still intact. Smoke rose from its stone chimney. Midnight snorted softly, nodding his head toward the cabin. Is that where Jack is? Fiona asked the horse, feeling only slightly ridiculous for expecting an answer. The Mustang's ears flicked forward in what seemed like confirmation. They approached cautiously, Fiona instinctively placing herself between Emma and potential danger. As they drew closer, the cabin door opened, revealing not Jack, but Catherine Blackwood, looking remarkably unharmed despite the reported fire. Took you long enough, the old woman called, her voice carrying in the mountain air. Get inside before Bennett's dogs pick up your trail. Relief washed over Fiona. Catherine, you're alive. Takes more than a fire to finish me. Catherine ushered them inside, casting an appreciative glance at Midnight, who had taken up a watchful position on the ridge above. He found you both. Good. The cabin interior was sparse but functional: wood stove, rough-hewn table, 2 cots against the far wall. Jack Harper sat at the table applying a bandage to a cut on his forearm. His face was smudged with soot, his eyes tired but alert. "You made it," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I was worried when you didn't answer my text." "Swatter, reception's spotty in these mountains." Fiona replied, then gestured to her daughter. "This is Emma." Jack nodded. "We spoke on the phone. Thank you for coming. Not like I had much choice after hearing that my grandfather was murdered and my mother's now a fugitive." Emma's tone was dry, but her eyes betrayed concern. "What happened to you two?" "The news is reporting Catherine's cabin burned down." "It did," Catherine confirmed grimly. "Bennett's men came back after Fiona left, started a fire to destroy my paintings." A fierce smile crossed her weathered face. "They didn't expect me to be waiting, or to have a shotgun." Jack winced as he secured his bandage. "I arrived just as they were setting the fire. Catherine had already discouraged them from searching the premises." His phrasing suggested the old woman's defense had been more forceful than her age might suggest. "But the cabin was already burning. We barely got out with these." He indicated several canvases leaning against the wall, Catherine's most crucial paintings. "And midnight found you in all that chaos?" Fiona asked, amazed again by the horse's abilities. "He led me to Jack when the fire started," Catherine said simply. "Then led us here to my father-in-law's old mining cabin. No one remembers it exists anymore." Her piercing gaze settled on Emma. "So the third witness has arrived, just as the prophecy said." Emma frowned. "Schroeder, third witness." Catherine exchanged glances with Jack, then sighed. "Sit down, both of you. There's more to this story than land rights and environmental crimes. Much more." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the first flakes of snow. Inside, the wood stove crackled, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls as Catherine Blackwood began her tale. "The Blackfoot people who lived in these mountains had a prophecy about Eagle Valley," she said, her voice taking on the cadence of a practiced storyteller. "They called it the Valley of Spirits because they believed it was a sacred place where the boundary between worlds was thin." Catherine moved to the fire, adding another log before continuing. "When white settlers came, the Blackfoot tried to protect the valley, but disease and broken treaties drove them away, all except for my husband's family, who had intermarried with early trappers and remained as guides." "What does this have to do with midnight?" Fiona asked gently. "Everything." Catherine's eyes reflected the firelight. "The prophecy spoke of a black horse with eyes like mountain lakes who would appear when the valley faced destruction. The keeper of the valley, they called him. A spirit in horse form who would choose 3 witnesses in each generation, those who could see beyond ordinary sight and would stand against those who would harm the sacred land." Emma shifted uncomfortably, her journalist's skepticism evident. "And you believe this horse is that spirit?" "I've seen him appear at every crucial moment in Eagle Valley's history for the past 75 years, Catherine replied evenly. "Always the same horse, never aging, never dying. I've watched him guide your grandfather James as he fought against the first dam project. I've seen him protect your father Thomas during his battle against the mining companies. And now he's chosen both of you." Fiona thought of midnight leading her to her father's hidden journal to Catherine's cabin away from danger. Always knowing, always watching. "The 3 witnesses in our generation. You mean Jack, Emma, and me?" Catherine nodded. "The seer, the speaker, and the keeper of images. One to discover the truth, one to share it with the world, one to preserve the evidence for future generations." She gestured to Jack. "Jack discovered the environmental violations through his work with sick animals. Emma will tell the story as a journalist. And you, Fiona, document it all with your camera, just as I did with my paintings." Jack leaned forward. "I know how this sounds. I didn't believe it either until I saw midnight appear during a forest fire 3 years ago, leading lost hikers to safety. No normal horse could have done what he did." Emma remained skeptical. "Even if this spirit horse is real, what does the prophecy say we're supposed to do? Bennett has the sheriff, the mayor, and half the county in his pocket. He's fabricated charges against Mom, and now he's destroyed your cabin and evidence." "Not all the evidence." Catherine moved to her saved canvases, selecting one that showed Eagle Valley from a high vantage point. This painting from 1952 shows the original property markers before Bennett's father had them moved. Combined with your grandfather's journal and the water test results, it proves both the land fraud and the environmental violations. We need to get everything to the State Environmental Agency in Helena, Jack added. I have a contact there who's been investigating Bennett's previous developments. She's been looking for evidence like this for years. But first, Catherine said firmly, you need to understand what's truly at stake. This isn't just about stopping a resort or even illegal mining. It's about protecting a power that Bennett doesn't understand, but intends to exploit. She pointed to a specific location on her painting, a hidden valley within the larger Eagle Valley marked by a distinctive rock formation. The heart of the valley, the place the Blackfoot considered most sacred, where the veil between worlds is thinnest. Her voice lowered. It's also directly above the richest deposit of rare earth minerals that Bennett wants to extract. Fiona studied the painting, recognition dawning. That's where midnight took me to find you, where your cabin was. No coincidence. Catherine's eyes held ancient knowledge. Bennett thinks he's just after minerals. He doesn't realize that disrupting that ground would release energies beyond his comprehension. Energies that have protected this valley and chosen its guardians for centuries. Emma shook her head, struggling with the mystical turn. This is a lot to process. You don't have to believe in spirits to understand that some places deserve protection, Jack said gently, whether for ecological, cultural, or even mystical reasons. A sudden whinny from outside cut through their conversation, midnight's warning. Jack moved swiftly to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. Bennett's security team, he reported grimly. At least 4 men, and they have rifles. They must have tracked us somehow. The truck, Fiona realized. They followed Jack's truck to where we left it. Catherine was already gathering her paintings. There's a back way out through the old mine shaft. It connects to tunnels that come out near the river. Jack shook his head. Those tunnels haven't been maintained in decades. They could collapse at any moment. You have a better idea, Catherine challenged. Before Jack could respond, the sharp crack of a rifle shot split the air. A bullet splintered the wooden shutter, missing Jack's head by inches. Get down, he yelled, pulling Emma away from the window. Outside, a man's voice boomed through a megaphone. Fiona Morgan, Catherine Blackwood. This is Sheriff Cooper. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up, and no one needs to get hurt. Fiona's heart pounded as she crawled to her backpack, ensuring the evidence was secure. They're not here for an arrest. They're here to silence us. Catherine nodded grimly. And destroy the remaining evidence. She turned to Emma. The mine shaft is our only chance. Take the north tunnel. It leads to the river about 2 miles downstream. What about you? Fiona asked, sensing Catherine's intention to stay behind. The old woman smiled with fierce determination. I'll buy you time. I'm too old to be running through tunnels anyway. No, Fiona objected. We all go together. Another shot hit the cabin, this one splintering the door. Outside, they could hear men moving into position around the structure. Final warning, Cooper called. We have orders to use whatever force necessary to bring you in. Catherine met Fiona's eyes with surprising calm. Midnight chose you for a reason, Fiona. You and Emma are the future protectors of this valley. I've done my part. She pressed a small object into Fiona's hand, a carved wooden pendant on a leather cord depicting a horse in mid-leap. This has been passed down through generations of valley guardians. Now it's yours. Before Fiona could protest further, Jack moved to the back wall, revealing a hidden door that led into darkness. The mine entrance. I'll lead the way. He switched on a flashlight, illuminating rough-hewn stone walls, disappearing into blackness. Catherine urged them toward it. Go! I'll handle Cooper and his thugs. Torn Fiona hesitated until another bullet shattered the cabin window, showering glass across the floor. Jack pulled her toward the tunnel entrance, Emma already ahead with her own phone's flashlight illuminating the way. Catherine, please, Fiona begged one last time. The old woman merely smiled, removing a revolver from her boot. Live to fight another day, Fiona Morgan. And remember, trust midnight. Always. With aching reluctance, Fiona followed Jack and Emma into the mine shaft. The hidden door closed behind them, sealing them in darkness, broken only by their flashlight beams. They moved quickly through the narrow passage, the sounds of confrontation at the cabin growing distant. The air was stale and cold, the walls dripping with moisture from underground springs. Will she be okay? Emma whispered, concern overriding her earlier skepticism. Jack's expression was grim. Catherine is tougher than she looks, and she knows these mountains better than anyone. If anyone can handle Cooper, it's her. They pressed on the tunnel, gradually widening into what had once been a proper mine shaft with ancient timber supports and the remnants of narrow-gauge rails on the floor. Their progress was slow, constrained by the need for caution on unstable ground and the limited illumination of their lights. After what felt like hours but was likely only 30 minutes, they reached a junction where the tunnel split in three directions. "Which way?" Emma asked, her voice tight with tension. Jack hesitated, examining each option. Catherine said north, but underground, it's hard to... A soft, nickering sound interrupted him. From the leftmost tunnel emerged a familiar silhouette. Midnight, his black coat seeming to absorb their flashlight beams, his blue eyes gleaming with otherworldly luminescence. "How did he get down here?" Emma breathed, amazed despite her skepticism. "The same way he does everything else," Fiona replied, moving toward the horse, "by being more than what he seems." Midnight tossed his head, clearly indicating they should follow him down the left passage. Without hesitation, Fiona obeyed Jack and Emma close behind. The Mustang led them through a bewildering series of turns that would have been impossible to navigate alone. Several times he stopped, preventing them from walking into unstable sections where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Eventually, the air grew fresher and the sound of running water reached their ears. Midnight increased his pace, leading them toward a light source ahead, daylight filtering through what appeared to be a cave opening. They emerged on a narrow ledge overlooking Eagle River, the water swollen with early snowmelt. The exit was well hidden, concealed by overhanging rocks and pine branches from casual observation. Jack checked his phone. "Still no service. We need to get to higher ground to call my contact at the environmental agency." Midnight snorted, drawing their attention. The horse stood at the edge of a barely visible path leading up the hillside away from the river. Once again, his message was clear. "Follow me." As they climbed, the first heavy snowflakes began to fall, quickly intensifying into a proper storm that would cover their tracks, but also make travel more difficult. Midnight seemed unbothered, picking his way confidently through increasingly treacherous terrain. "Where is he taking us?" Emma called over the rising wind, her city-appropriate clothing proving inadequate for the mountain storm. "Somewhere safe, I hope," Fiona replied, sharing her jacket with her daughter. "Midnight hasn't steered us wrong yet." The Mustang led them to a ridgeline that offered a sweeping view of Eagle Valley below. Through gaps in the snowfall, they could see the Oak Ridge construction site more active than ever with vehicles and equipment. "They're accelerating the work," Jack observed grimly. "Bennett must be trying to establish enough presence on the site that stopping the project becomes politically impossible, regardless of its legality." Fiona raised her camera, using its telephoto lens to study the activity more closely. What she saw sent ice through her veins. "That's not resort construction," she said. "Those are mining operations, core sampling equipment, preliminary extraction tests." She pointed to vehicles marked with hazard symbols. "And those contain chemicals used in extraction processes that were banned in Montana 5 years ago." Jack nodded grimly. "Proof that this was never about a resort. Bennett is preparing for full-scale strip mining using illegal methods." Emma had been checking her phone. "I've got 1 bar of service up here, enough to send a text or make a quick call." "Call this number," Jack said, providing the contact information for his ally at the environmental agency. "Tell her what we've seen and that we have documentation. She can mobilize a state inspection team." As Emma made the call, moving to the highest point for better reception, Midnight grew suddenly alert, ears, swiveling muscles, tensing. The horse stared intently down the mountain toward a stand of pine trees 100 yards below. "Someone's coming," Fiona warned, recognizing the Mustang's warning signals. Jack drew them behind a rocky outcropping, just as 2 figures emerged from the trees, Bennett's security personnel following their trail despite the snow. "How did they find us?" Emma whispered, ending her call quickly. "Thermal imaging, maybe," Jack suggested. "Bennett has military-grade equipment for his security team." Midnight pawed at the ground impatiently, clearly wanting them to move. But the only path forward led across an exposed slope that would leave them vulnerable to pursuit. "We have to split up," Fiona decided. "I'll draw them away with the evidence. You two get to the main road and meet your contact from the environmental agency." "No way," Emma objected immediately. "We stay together." "Emma's right. Jack agreed. Bennett's men won't hesitate to use lethal force if they catch you alone. Well, Midnight interrupted their debate with an insistent whinny louder than was safe, given their pursuer's proximity. The Mustang moved directly to Fiona, lowering his head in an unmistakable invitation. He wants me to ride him, Fiona realized, astonished. For generations, Midnight had been observed, followed, trusted, but never ridden. No human had ever sat on the spirit horse's back, not in all the years of Catherine's observations or the Blackfoot legends. Emma's eyes widened. Can you even... he's wild. Not exactly wild, Fiona said softly, approaching Midnight with reverent caution. Something else entirely. Midnight remained perfectly still as Fiona carefully mounted, settling onto his bare back, with the natural seat of someone raised around horses. The Mustang felt solid beneath her, his muscles coiled with restrained power, his body radiating a warmth that belied the winter storm. Get to safety, Fiona told Jack and Emma. I'll lead them away from you and meet you in Bristol at Sarah's clinic. Before they could object further, Midnight sprang forward, carrying Fiona across the exposed ridge with supernatural speed and grace. Behind them, shouts indicated their pursuers had spotted them. Riding Midnight was unlike anything Fiona had experienced. The horse moved as if gravity was merely a suggestion, leaping across gaps that should have been impossible, finding footholds where none seemed to exist. Snow swirled around them, limiting visibility to anyone watching, but seeming not to affect Midnight's navigation at all. A rifle shot cracked through the storm, the bullet whining harmlessly past. Midnight accelerated, putting distance between them and Bennett's men with each powerful stride. They crested another ridge, then plunged down its far side into a series of ravines that Fiona knew would be nearly impossible for humans to navigate on foot. Yet Midnight moved through them effortlessly, his hooves somehow finding purchase on ice-slick rock and snow-covered inclines. After what seemed like both an eternity and an instant, they emerged onto a Forest Service road miles from where they'd started. Midnight slowed his breathing, even despite the exertion, not a drop of sweat on his midnight coat, despite their breakneck journey. Fiona slid from his back legs, shaky adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the horse's powerful neck. Midnight nudged her gently, then raised his head sharply, attention focused on the road ahead. In the distance, the sound of an approaching vehicle reached their ears. Fiona tensed, preparing to flee back into the forest, but Midnight remained calm, ears forward in relaxed curiosity rather than alarm. A familiar pickup truck came into view through the falling snow, Emma behind the wheel, Jack in the passenger seat, both looking relieved to find Fiona safe. "How did you find me?" Fiona asked as they pulled alongside. "We didn't," Emma admitted, gesturing toward Jack. "He said to drive this way, that you'd be here." She glanced at Midnight with newfound respect. "Apparently the horse network has better coverage than our phones." Jack smiled tiredly. "I've learned to trust the impossible when it comes to Midnight." His expression turned serious. "My contact is sending a team, but they won't arrive until tomorrow morning. Bennett is moving too quickly. By then he may have already destroyed the most sensitive areas. Then we need to stop him ourselves." Fiona said, the wooden pendant Catherine had given her warm against her skin beneath her jacket. "We need to expose him now before more damage is done." "How?" Emma asked. "Cooper controls local law enforcement. State authorities won't get here in time." A plan formed in Fiona's mind, dangerous, possibly foolhardy, but potentially effective. "We don't need officials. We need witnesses. The court of public opinion can move faster than legal systems." She outlined her idea. Emma would use her journalism connections to organize a live broadcast from the Oak Ridge site, documenting the illegal mining operations in real time. Fiona would provide visual evidence through her photography. Jack would explain the environmental implications as a respected local veterinarian. "Bennett won't just let us walk in with cameras," Jack pointed out. "No," Fiona agreed, "but he might let me in if he thinks I'm coming to negotiate, to trade Catherine's paintings for the charges being dropped." "That's insanely dangerous," Emma objected. "He'll never let you leave once he has the evidence. Carnastonemum. He won't know that I'll be broadcasting everything live through Emma's media connections, or that Jack will be leading state environmental officials to the exact coordinates where the illegal chemicals are being stored." Midnight stomped impatiently, clearly approving of the direct approach. "It might work," Jack said slowly. if we coordinate the timing perfectly. My contact said they can have a helicopter in the air within 3 hours once they have probable cause. And I can get my editor to authorize emergency satellite equipment. Emma added, warming to the plan despite her concerns. We'd have a direct uplink regardless of local internet or cell service. Fiona looked to Midnight, seeking final confirmation. The Mustang's blue eyes held her gaze steadily, conveying silent support. Then it's settled, she said, Catherine's words echoing in her mind. Trust Midnight. Always. They drove to Bristol using the 3 hours to prepare. Emma called in every favor she had at the Tribune, securing both the satellite uplink equipment and an assurance that their broadcast would be picked up by major networks if it delivered what she promised. Jack coordinated with his environmental agency contact, providing GPS coordinates and detailed descriptions of the violations they'd witnessed. The official response was cautious but committed. If they could provide live proof of illegal chemicals on site, a state emergency team would be dispatched immediately. Fiona prepared herself mentally for the confrontation with Bennett, reviewing Catherine's paintings and her father's journal one last time. The evidence was compelling when viewed as a whole, irrefutable proof of decades of corruption and environmental crimes. As dusk approached, they made their final preparations. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains cloaked in pristine snow that glowed in the fading light. Once we're in position, I'll call Bennett, Fiona explained, checking her equipment one last time. Tell him I want to make a deal. That should get us onto the site. Be careful, Emma said, the professional detachment she'd maintained beginning to crack. I just found you again. I'm not ready to lose you. The simple declaration hit Fiona with unexpected force. Despite everything they'd been through, all the missed years, the arguments, the estrangement, the bond between them remained. Damaged but not broken. You won't lose me, Fiona promised, embracing her daughter for the first time in 5 years. We have too much catching up to do. They parted with the plan set in motion. Jack would position himself at the access road, with Emma's editor ready to guide the environmental team when they arrived. Emma would set up the broadcast equipment on the ridge overlooking the construction site. Fiona would approach Bennett directly, wearing a concealed microphone linked to Emma's uplink. And Midnight? Midnight would do what he had always done. Watch, guide, protect. The black Mustang accompanied Fiona to the edge of the cleared area surrounding the Oak Ridge site, remaining hidden in the tree line as she made her call to Bennett. The CEO answered on the second ring, his voice smoothly controlling the surprise he must have felt. Ms. Morgan, I was beginning to think you'd left our little valley for good. I have something you want, Fiona replied bluntly. Catherine Blackwood's original paintings, the ones proving your land fraud. A pause. I'm listening. I want the charges against me dropped, and written assurance that Catherine's property remains hers untouched by your development. Bennett's laugh held no humor. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Miss Morgan. Sheriff Cooper has a warrant for your arrest. Your father's research has been discredited as the ravings of a senile old man, and Catherine Blackwood is officially missing, presumed dead in a tragic cabin fire. Yet here I am with the one thing that could stop your project in its tracks. Fiona kept her voice steady. The paintings are in a secure location. If anything happens to me, they go directly to the state attorney general, along with my father's journal and the water test results. Another pause, longer this time. Come to the main site office. Alone. We'll discuss terms. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As she ended the call, Fiona took a deep breath, checking that the microphone was functioning and that her camera, seemingly turned off, was actually recording in stealth mode, a feature designed for wildlife documentation in sensitive areas. Midnight approached, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder in what felt distinctly like encouragement. I know, Fiona whispered, drawing strength from the contact. This is what you chose me for. What my father and grandfather fought for. I know. The Mustang's blue eyes seemed to glow in the gathering darkness, ancient and knowing. With one final touch of his velvet muzzle to her cheek, he turned and disappeared into the forest, moving toward the ridge where Emma was setting up. Fiona squared her shoulders and began walking toward the Oak Ridge construction site, Catherine's wooden horse pendant, a talisman against her heart. The security checkpoint was expecting her. 2 guards with automatic rifles escorted her past heavy equipment to a prefabricated office building at the center of the site. Around them, work continued despite the late hour, powerful floodlights illuminating what was clearly a mining operation rather than resort construction. Maxwell Bennett waited inside impeccably dressed despite the remote location. Sheriff Cooper stood beside him, hand resting meaningfully on his sidearm. "Ms. Morgan." Bennett greeted her with plastic civility. "I see you've decided to be reasonable." "I've decided to protect what matters," Fiona replied carefully, aware of Emma listening through the microphone of unknown viewers who might soon be watching. "This valley has been my family's home for generations." "Sentimentality is expensive in business," Bennett said dismissively. "Now where are these paintings you claim to have?" Fiona maintained her calm. "First, I want to understand exactly what we're negotiating over. This doesn't look like resort construction to me." Cooper stepped forward menacingly. "You're not asking the questions here." Bennett held up a hand, stopping him. "It's a fair observation, Sheriff. No reason to be hostile." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Morgan, you're correct. The resort was always Phase 2 of our development. Phase 1 involves extracting certain valuable resources that would otherwise be wasted." "Rare earth minerals," Fiona said, "using extraction methods banned in Montana." Bennett's expression hardened slightly. "Methods that are perfectly legal in other states with less restrictive regulations. The economic benefits to Silverwood will be substantial. And the environmental costs, the poisoned groundwater, the destruction of the valley's ecosystem. Acceptable losses in the pursuit of progress." Bennett's facade of civility was cracking. "Your father couldn't understand that. He was too blinded by his primitive reverence for this land." "He understood perfectly what you were planning," Fiona countered. "That's why you had him killed." Cooper's hand tightened on his gun. "Watch your accusations, Ms. Morgan." Outside, the sound of a helicopter broke the night silence, approaching rapidly from the east. Bennett moved to the window, frowning. "Cooper, check what that is. We're not expecting any deliveries tonight." As the sheriff stepped outside, Fiona pressed her advantage. "That would be the State Environmental Agency responding to evidence of illegal chemical use on this site." She allowed herself a small smile at Bennett's shocked expression. "Oh, and we're currently broadcasting this conversation to several major networks." Bennett's face contorted with rage. "You stupid!" He lunged across the desk, grabbing for Fiona's jacket where the microphone was concealed. She twisted away, but Cooper had returned, drawing his weapon. "Don't move," he ordered, aiming at Fiona's chest. The helicopter's spotlight suddenly illuminated the office through the windows, bathing the scene in harsh white light. Outside, authoritative voices ordered workers to stop all activities. "Maxwell Bennett," a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This site is now under state jurisdiction. All personnel must lay down tools and exit the area immediately." Bennett's composed exterior shattered completely. "This is private property," he shouted, though no one outside could hear him. "Cooper, do something." The sheriff hesitated, gun still trained on Fiona, but his resolve visibly wavering. "Bennett, if the state's involved, I can't—" "Shoot her," Bennett hissed. "No witnesses, no case." Cooper's finger tightened on the trigger, his face a mask of indecision. A deafening crash interrupted the standoff as something large and dark burst through the office window, midnight glass shattering around his powerful form as he landed between Fiona and Cooper's gun. The sheriff fired reflexively, the bullet striking the Mustang's shoulder. Midnight reared hooves, slashing the air inches from Cooper's face, driving him back against the wall. His gun clattered to the floor, discharged. Bennett made a desperate lunge for the fallen weapon, but Fiona was faster, kicking it across the room. Outside, state officers were converging on the building, alerted by the gunshot. Midnight stood bleeding, but unbowed, his blue eyes fixed on Bennett with ancient judgment. The CEO backed away, genuine fear replacing his anger. "What is that thing?" he whispered, seeing perhaps for the first time what Catherine had described, not just a horse, but a spirit, a guardian, a power as old as the valley itself. "The true owner of this land," Fiona answered as officers burst through the door, weapons drawn. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, evidence collection, and medical attention for Midnight, who allowed a veterinarian from the state team to treat his wound with surprising docility. Bennett and Cooper were taken into custody, the environmental violations documented thoroughly, and the broadcast, which Emma had indeed managed to get live on, several networks created an immediate public outcry that ensured the case wouldn't be quietly buried. By dawn, Fiona, Emma, and Jack stood on the ridge overlooking Eagle Valley, watching as state officials continued cataloging violations and securing the site. Midnight grazed nearby, his wounded shoulder bandaged, but his movement unimpeded as if the injury were merely an inconvenience. "What happens now?" Emma asked the journalist in her already thinking of follow-up stories. "Bennett will fight the charges," Jack said. "But between the environmental violations, the falsified land documents, and now attempted murder, caught on live television, he's facing years in prison." In the valley, Fiona's concern was for the land itself, for the sacred ground Catherine had described. "Protected if I have anything to say about it." Catherine's voice surprised them all as the elderly woman emerged from the trees looking tired but triumphant. "The State Historical Society has already expressed interest in designating the entire northern section as a cultural heritage site based on my paintings." Joyful reunions followed, with Catherine explaining how she'd evaded Bennett's men at the cabin and made her own way to safety through routes only she knew. As the sun rose fully over Eagle Valley, painting the snow-covered mountains in golden rose, Fiona stood slightly apart, watching Midnight graze peacefully despite his wound. The Mustang looked up, meeting her gaze with those impossibly blue eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. "Three witnesses," Fiona murmured, thinking of Catherine's prophecy. "The seer, the speaker, and the keeper of images." Midnight approached, nuzzling her hand gently before turning to gaze out over the valley he had protected for generations. His message seemed clear: "My work continues, as does yours." In that moment, Fiona Morgan knew she would not be returning to her nomadic life, photographing wildlife in distant lands. Her place was here, documenting this valley, preserving its stories, teaching others to see what she had learned to see. Emma joined her camera and handed her daughter the speaker who would tell this story to the world. And beyond them, Jack and Catherine, representatives of past and present guardians, all linked by the mysterious horse who had chosen them. "He's leaving, isn't he?" Emma asked softly, watching as Midnight began walking toward the wilderness beyond the ridge. "Only for now," Fiona replied, certain of this truth. "He'll return when he's needed, when the valley needs protection again." The black Mustang paused at the forest edge, looking back one final time, his star-marked forehead catching the morning light. Then, with a toss of his proud head, he vanished among the ancient pines, a guardian returning to the shadows until called forth again. Fiona touched Catherine's wooden pendant, now hers to carry forward. "The valley endures," she said, "and so do we." Above them, an eagle circled on thermal currents, its cry echoing across the mountains, free, wild, and home. In the end, Eagle Valley's secrets lay bare, and justice found its voice through those brave enough to speak. Fiona Morgan finally made peace with the past, discovering strength in forgiveness, family, and the enduring connection between humanity and nature. Midnight, the guardian spirit of the valley, quietly returned to the wilderness, waiting patiently for the moment he would once again be needed. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey. Remember, sometimes the most important answers come when we listen closely to the whispers from within, guiding us back to who we were always meant to become.